The constant sound of the waves fills the air. The wind brings the salt, the sea breeze, the memory of those who have walked along this shore hundreds of times. But now, picture a line advancing into the sea. Not a rough, functional, technical breakwater, nor an improvised fishing pier made just to withstand the elements. Think of a structure designed for walking over the ocean, a space where engineering and landscape interact with leisure and culture. In Praia Grande, in São Paulo, this concept is beginning to take shape. Still on paper, a new tourist pier emerges as a promise of urban, economic, and symbolic transformation. Designed to become a postcard, a meeting point, and a new axis of the waterfront. The project is still on paper, in its embryonic phase. But that's how great landmarks begin, first as a drawing and a political decision, then as concrete and steel, and an experience that changes the way people enjoy the beach. Stay with us for the next few minutes and discover how a simple advance over the ocean can forever change the relationship between the city and the sea. The Praia Grande project is planned for the Aviação neighborhood, one of the most symbolic stretches of the local shoreline. It is exactly from there that the pier is expected to extend, about 500 meters long and 35 meters wide, creating a continuous platform over the ocean. In terms of area, this represents approximately 17,500 square meters, which is larger than 2 soccer fields suspended over the water. An extension that doesn't go unnoticed, whether by those walking on the sand or by those observing from above. All this structure will be directly connected to the beach avenue with free access, green areas, contemplation spaces, and mixed-use areas designed to welcome residents and tourists throughout the year. But the main highlight of the project is not just its size, it's the concept. This is not a functional pier designed for heavy docking or port operations. It was created as an urban facility designed for staying, circulation, and experience. And this raises the inevitable question: what was the political, urban, and symbolic trigger that made this project move from desire to an actual plan? Praia Grande grew up facing the sea, but for decades this relationship was almost always horizontal. Boardwalk, kiosks, bike lane, stretch of sand. The city expanded parallel to the shore, never actually advancing over the ocean. As an active part of the urban space, the new pier emerges precisely to break this boundary. It proposes urban depth, not just physical, but conceptual as well. It's an attempt to turn the sea into an extension of the city, and not just a background landscape. Logically, the motivation for such a project mixes tourism, identity, and economy. Praia Grande receives about 2 million visitors during the high season according to City Hall data, but it still depends heavily on seasonality. Holidays and summer concentrate the flow, but the rest of the year operates below its potential. There is a lack of attractions capable of extending visitor stays, creating continuous programming, and encouraging the use of the waterfront at different times of the year. The pier was created as a response to this gap, and the choice of a themed pier is not a coincidence. The project revives the memory of the old airfield, incorporating the Aeronautical Museum, cultural spaces, and a replica of a historic airplane. It is a rare narrative feature in a structure of this kind, connecting engineering, local history, and the tourist experience. From an economic point of view, the adopted model is that of a public concession. Construction and operation are handled by the private sector, while the public authorities act as the organizer and regulator. But every urban ambition, of course, finds its limit in engineering. And before comparing numbers or impacts, it's necessary to understand how a pier is built from scratch, starting exactly from the stage where this project is today. Despite all the expected benefits and the buzz generated after the project started, it's worth highlighting something. The Praia Grande Pier is still in its embryonic stage. Up until the completion of this video, the project was in technical modeling and in preliminary processes of price consultation and economic structuring. In other words, there is no construction site set up, no piles driven, and no active work front. And it's precisely at this initial stage that it's worth understanding how a modern tourist pier actually comes to life. Everything starts long before the concrete. The first challenge is at the sea's bottom. The initial stage involves detailed bathymetric surveys, which map the depths, slopes, and irregularities of the seabed. At the same time, geotechnical studies are carried out, with underwater surveys capable of identifying the type of soil, sand, silt, clay, or rock, and its load-bearing capacity. This data is crucial in the marine environment. This error is not easily corrected. Then, along with that, wave patterns, currents, tides, and the history of storm surges are analyzed. A tourist pier can't be designed just for a nice day. It needs to withstand extreme events, which, although rare, define the lifespan of the structure. With this information in hand, the structural system is defined. For piers of this size, the most common model is deep piles driven into the seabed. They work like invisible columns, transferring the loads from the superstructure down to the more resistant layers of the soil. These piles can be made of reinforced concrete, pre-stressed concrete, or steel. Depending on local conditions and the construction strategy, the set of piles forms a real submerged forest of support. On top of this structure, longitudinal and transverse beams are built, creating the structural deck that supports the entire pier. By the way, the elevation of this deck is not just an aesthetic detail. It is calculated to reduce the direct impact of waves, minimize the effects of sea spray, and prevent the structure from constantly operating in the splash zone, where environmental aggressiveness is greater. Whenever possible, the superstructure is precast. Slabs, beams, and structural elements are manufactured in a controlled environment and transported for assembly on site. This reduces deadlines, improves quality control, and decreases environmental interference, since working time at sea is limited and expensive. After the main structure, the complementary systems are installed. Guardrails need to meet safety standards for large flows of people. The lighting must withstand salt erosion and ensure nighttime visibility without dazzling the surroundings. Drainage is essential to prevent water accumulation on the deck. Electrical and data installations need to be protected against moisture and salinity. The flooring must withstand heavy traffic, thermal expansion, and the constant action of sea spray. In the specific case of Praia Grande, there is an additional challenge. The architectural program is not just about a circulation deck. The project includes areas for staying, cultural spaces, museum equipment, commercial spaces, and places for events. All of this needs to be considered from the beginning, because at sea, there is no cheap improvisation. Every decision made on paper impacts the cost, timeline, maintenance, and lifespan of the project. And that's why a tourist pier may seem simple at first glance, but from an engineering perspective, it's one of the most demanding types of urban infrastructure. In the ocean, every meter gain needs to be justified, and every mistake is expensive to fix. Later, very expensive. With half a kilometer in length, the Praia Grande Pier will be on a scale to enter directly into the elite of major tourist structures in the country. In Brazil, the main comparison is the Santos Submarine Outfall Pier, which extends about 400 meters into the sea. The main difference between the São Paulo projects, however, lies in the concept. The Santos Pier is narrower, with a linear design focused on circulation and recreational fishing. Meanwhile, the Praia Grande one is wider and has distributed uses: leisure, events, a museum, and commerce. Now, if we expand the scale, the 500 meters of the Praia Grande Pier already start to compare with medium-sized urban bridges. For comparison, the Otávio Frias de Oliveira bridge in São Paulo is about 1,380 meters in total, but the main spans are of the same order of magnitude. In other words, the pier is long enough to require structural solutions similar to a cable-stayed bridge or a continuous beam, but in a technically more aggressive maritime environment on the international stage. The Santa Monica Pier in the United States is approximately half a kilometer long. According to official tourist materials, The attraction receives millions of visitors per year and is home to amusement parks, restaurants, shops, and cultural events. In financial terms, construction projects of the tourist pier type, similar to the one in Praia Grande, usually range between 150 million and 300 million reais. Depending on the type of foundation, the height of the deck, the level of construction, and the architectural standard. It's not an out-of-the-ordinary amount when compared to other special infrastructures, but it takes on different contours, translated into numbers that are, let's say, more common in our daily lives. 200 million reais is equivalent to approximately 400 apartments valued at 500,000 reais each, or the purchase of 1,333 brand new Jeep Compass models, each costing 150,000 reais. With that same amount, it would be possible to expand 10 to 15 large public schools, or even build 20 to 30 kilometers of complete urban road corridors, depending on the standard adopted. The expectation is for hundreds of direct and indirect jobs. After completion, the number increases with operation, maintenance, and services. In addition, the surrounding area tends to increase in value. Hotels, commerce, and urban mobility follow this type of structuring investment. More than just attracting tourists, the pier repositions Praia Grande on the map of architectural and urban tourism in Brazil. In fact, the new Praia Grande Pier does not yet exist in concrete, but it already exists in method and intention. It starts small on paper and big in ambition, advancing over the sea with technique, narrative, and urban use. If well executed, it will not just be a sightseeing spot, but a new axis of the city. In the end, that's what great works do. They don't just occupy space, they redefine territory. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the Grand Pier in Praia Grande, São Paulo? Share your thoughts in the comments. It's really something interesting, especially for the economic growth of the region, since it will attract more tourists. Leave your opinion in the comments below. I'll stop here. A big hug and see you in the next video.